Slaves were escaping some of the worst forms of slavery in southern states, Alabama, North Carolina, Georgia. They were escaping from those places and they came into Florida looking for a haven of safety, a place to raise their families. Angola is a project that I started in 2003 to find artifacts related to a Black Seminole settlement called Angola. The people of Angola lived in this area from 1812 to 1821, and they were living in freedom, practicing their cultural traditions, raising their families just like we do in peace, trading with the other folks that were here, the Cuban fishermen, the British, the Spanish. This time in American history was very, very tenuous. The ownership of Florida was, slipping through the hands of the Spanish, and the Americans wanted it. And so but the Angola influence was building and spreading and expanding. Our researchers believe it was Andrew Jackson who indirectly ordered the destruction of Angola. In 1821, their settlement was torched in a fiery raid at night. People were returned into slavery, men, women, and children. Some escaped this destruction. They made their way to Key Biscayne, where Miami is. They crossed the dangerous Gulf Stream and dug out boats and ended up in Red Bay's Andros Island in the Bahamas. They set a goal. We want to live in freedom. We're determined to live in freedom. We want peace for our family. Same thing that we want as Americans. And they just set their eyes on the prize and just kept on coming and running. And that story of their courage, that no matter what spirit, that touches me in an incredible way, because it tells me that I can make it through my, through the things that I'm fearful about in my life. We started excavations underground in 2006, and we've continued them until about 2010, actually. We've done several, maybe 3 excavations in this very spot.
For Angola, it's not just that we're looking for ephemeral material record, but it's also that after 1821, that landscape of Angola was removed. There was almost nothing left. By the time the Anglo-American settlers came in the 1840s, they built an entirely different landscape over what had been there. So there was nothing throughout this area, our target area, that was obviously connected to Angola. There was no places that looked like things, no ruins. So the archaeological puzzle was, well, where do we look over a very large area? What we've done is different types of surveys, underwater surveys, terrestrial surveys, but what we're trying to be most promising is remote sensing surveys that let us, in fact, look underground to see not just the layers from the early 20th century and late 19th century, mid 19th century from the village of Manatee and Bradenton, but what was underneath that. And we were able to find some areas that really nothing was built on top of. And so we were able to go through fairly clean soil, filled from the floodings of the river, to get 3 feet down without too much other materials to get to the early 19th century. And that early 19th century landscape is the landscape of Angola. We do the excavations. We have a large crew of people because we want to have a tremendous amount of redundancy, that we have the person doing the 2 or 3 people doing the excavating. The artifacts are put into bags. The bags are marked from which excavation unit, how far down it came from. They're then brought back to this lab. Then we have the cleaning of the artifacts, so we make sure that it is an artifact rather than just a stone or some other, something else like that. After they're washed, then they're examined under a microscope if need be, or just by eyes. They're weighed, they're measured, they're identified. Those are then entered in terms of where the artifacts came from, in terms of the spatial aspect and the depth. That's written up in a report. And then we start interpreting it. So it's a long process to go from excavating to actually understanding what we have from the excavation. So from this excavation by Manatee Mineral Spring, the artifacts that we have are fairly mundane objects from the early 19th century. They're broken pieces from dishes and bowls. The objects themselves aren't significant. It's the context for these objects that builds the significance. The Angola community was widespread over the southern Tampa Bay and along the Manatee River and towards Sarasota Bay. What we're trying to do for the archaeology is find those places of the people of Angola, the actual houses, their fields, the things they used, and the resources they used to build a way of life in the early 19th century in this area.
When I come to this spot, I just feel the spirit of the ancestors calling, and I know that they were here, and I know that they are guiding this project. Who knew that their pottery shards would tell us such a rich story of their existence here? Who knew that the tools that they would drop on the ground would tell us this story, would help us to piece the puzzle together of how they lived and when they lived and what they did in this particular area.